What is going on, my fellow weebs? Chrono here, and welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be talking about augmentations, my recommendations for what to look out for, what's cost effective, what's going to be really expensive, and what just pushes out tons of damage for you. Really quick for jumping into that, guys, I did want to pop over and hang on, let me pull it up here for us. Give me just a sec. I just wanted to shout you guys out in general. Recently, quite a few of you guys have jumped back over and subscribed to the channel. I really appreciate that. Oh, you guys actually get to see a little. Did I come? Oh no, it came out. Never mind. You guys get to see a little bit of a sneak peek of a few things, but I want to shout out you guys and say thank you. Recently, since popping out the whole VTuber thing and a bunch of other things that have been going on the channel, we did lose quite a few subscribers, and recently we bumped right back up again. Also, those of you guys who decided to subscribe to the other two channels that I have here with extra content. We have the VODs channel, of course, if you guys want to keep up with VODs, and as well as the Chrono and French channel, where I'll be uploading just random things that me and my friends decide to do. But I did just want to say thank you guys, because it does mean a lot. And seeing the subscriber number drop, even though it wasn't by a super huge amount, does kind of make it harder to want to do videos consistently sometimes. But enough of that ranting on. Let's go ahead and talk about what we're here to talk about. Today's video, we're going to be covering augments. Now, it's just a few days before we get our next update, where we'll be getting our gear to go up to plus 50. And with plus 50 means one extra augment slot. Now, a few videos have popped up from a couple of my fellow content creators, as well as some people have been asking, what should I put in that augment slot? What am I going to put in that fifth slot itself? Now, I talked about it a little bit over on the Arcs Trash podcast. If you guys haven't watched it yet, it's a podcast that's done by my good friend Karopi. Super awesome stuff. You guys should check it out. But to be perfectly honest, if you're watching my videos, I feel like you probably already know who Karopi is. So if you haven't seen that episode, we're in the most recent one. We talk about this a little bit. It's worth a listen. But either way, I wanted to go into a little bit more of a deep dive of how I choose my specific augments, as well as what I would recommend others pick if they were to ask me, what augment should I grab, what's cost effective, so on and so forth, right? So let's go ahead and go over just a few options you have when it comes down to augmentations or augmenting your gear. Now, for a quick disclaimer, I do not say that I have the end all be all perfect solution to exactly what you should augment across the board every single step of the way. The way people augment are based on how they play the game. Some people augment to be able to do TAs, others augment for comfort, others augment for damage, but within reason. Sometimes others augment for damage outside of reason. And there's some people who like to augment just to push their battle power as high as possible. We're going to be covering a lot of those things here today. So look and listen to what we're talking about. So look at what we're talking about, listen to it, and see if it applies to what you're looking for when you're looking at augmenting your gear. And if you're one of those people that are like, I don't want to have to worry about augmenting my gear, first off, why are you here? And second off, you should augment it anyway. Even if you choose super cheap augments that aren't that fantastic, that just give you a bit of damage, it's still damage, it's still battle power, they're easily replaceable with the system we currently have available to us, and you'll find that it's really nice to be able to utilize some extra augments, even if it's just for comfort. So let's get started. The first thing you're going to look at when you're looking at augments is always going to be a soul. Now, the souls, we have quite a few different choices, and how we choose our souls are going to be dependent upon what weapon we're using and what we're trying to do with our gear. The current meta souls we have access to are Dust, Ragris, and Renus respectively. They have level 3 versions, giving us 2.5% potency. At the moment, it is HP, which isn't, exactly what we want specifically. We have quite a decent amount of HP. Some people might want it, but realistically speaking, if you're pushing damage as much as possible, you care more about PP than HP, to be honest. So in that respect, we do have Didal, Pedis, and Next. You're probably looking at these thinking, well, it's only 2.5% weapon potency. Remember a while back we talked about how Phantasy Star devs tend to work on patterns? There's a good chance with the release of the higher tiered Redum zones, the higher tiered Alio zones, and the next tier when it comes to urgent quests, we will likely see a rank 3 version of all of these souls. Meaning we'll probably see, PP plus 5, 2.5% technique, 2.5% range, and 2.5% melee. So Didal 3, Pedis 3, and Next 3 are likely on the way next week, if not, shortly 2 weeks after. Now, if you're not too concerned about, the extra PP, then you're fine with Dust, Ragris, and Renus. Realistically, these are probably going to get cheaper as people start moving over to these souls. Now, it depends on what gets farmed, since people aren't going to be fighting these enemies as much at a higher tier. These might end up being about the same price between, like, people wanting these and also the readily availability versus people not farming these as much, but they're less available. So it might balance itself out in that sort of way, which is totally possible. So realistically, I'd recommend keep an eye out on the price. Maybe it's something that you farm on your own. Maybe it's something that you buy off the market. Either way, this has value. So don't do yourself any disservices. If you're farming these, don't just use them because they were free. I got them from a farm. Realistically, if you're happy with something that might be cheaper, sell the item that's more expensive and purchase the cheaper item. That way, you got the differential. You end up making a bit of money and saving yourself a bit of money in that sort of way. Moving forward, we have what I like to call the budget option, the Forms Souls. So Forms does still give us weapon potency, up to 2% actually, but you also have the added benefit of damage resistance. Now, this isn't everyone's first choice. It might be yours. Maybe you want to go a bit more defensive, and in that situation, you've lucked out because these souls are actually going to be a good amount cheaper. You feel like this is too much, realistically speaking, honestly, you can get like a Diddle Soul 2 at 2% potency, still get the HP, get the PP, or even a Dust Soul 2, still get the HP. I would still recommend that over Forms. But if you really want to go with the damage resistance and you really want to save as much money as possible, you're probably going to want the Form Soul. Now, at the moment, we don't really have a good choice for what I like to call all class or all stat options. You're gonna hear me say that quite a few times in this video. The only one we have available to us right now is Dull Soul, which just increases our floor potency and gives us an extra bit of PP. In case you're curious at what floor potency stands for, we've talked about it in other videos, but what floor potency stands for essentially is your weapons, whenever you're attacking, have a variance. You have a low roll and a high roll. Say like you have 7 and 10, right? Your high roll is 10, your low roll is 7. What this does is it increases the percentage of your floor potency. So that 7 can move up to an 8 possibly. Granted, of course, I'm using very basic numbers, but you get the idea. While it increases your average DPS, it does not increase your maximum DPS. So technically, it does help, but not as much as you might think. If you're familiar with Oracle or PSO2 Oracle, it's basically dexterity from Oracle. Now we do have to talk about one other soul, the Addi soul, which will be coming from Darkfall's Interception. Likely will have a rank 1, 2, and 3 version of this. Now, if I'm right, we have a rank 3 version of this. I feel like its potency is only going to go up to a maximum of 1.75, maybe 2% at max. I don't know that this is going to increase. The top portions of these augments never do. Actually, hold that thought. Okay, I was wrong. There is one exception, which is Dreadkeeper, which its top portion increases, but realistically, in most cases, they don't. Across all the souls, they haven't. Across all the other types, they don't. So they just kind of stay the same. So it's possible this might increase, but if this hits 2.5%, this is just the new best soul. Its potency, its PP, and its HP, it would be unbalanced, and I think they wouldn't do it. So keep an eye out for it. I could be wrong. I would say this is probably going to be a 1.75 if it's up to a 3, 2.0 at max. And it's a great choice for an all class build, in case you want to have units that you can use for everything. If you play all classes or you use a multi-weapon, you want to be able to use both sides of your multi-weapon, this is a good choice essentially for that setup. Now that we've talked about souls and infinitum, I promise you everything is not going to be this long of a conversation. We'll talk about the next choice. The next choice is going to be dependent on what you personally are trying to set up. So if you were trying to set up, let's say, a all stat setup, the next choice is going to be a bit difficult for you. But let's say you're going with, melee weapons, or tech weapons, or range weapons. This should be pretty simple. You've got the basic augments. The basic augments, pretty self-explanatory. They're basic, they're main stat, and they're really easy to, they're really inexpensive, to be perfectly honest. You can make them by going for the exchanging in the item lab and exchange upwards. It looks like they're also available right now from the seasonal point shop, so you can get quite a few of them, and they are going to be fairly inexpensive because people like to use these points and then try to sell the items. So this is a good cheap option. If you're someone who is going with an all class build, your two options are going to be deafness, which is just floor potency, or going the crazy mastery route. Now, mastery route increases your potency, your floor potency, and damage resistance, so it is pretty good. However, you need mastery 1. To make mastery 1, you have to combine all of the stats to then put into mastery 2, which you have to combine mastery 1s to make mastery 2s, and then mastery 2s to make mastery 3s. while it is a ton of battle power, so if that's your goal, ton of BP, it is not the strongest option for just outright damage. You do get potency floor, you do get potency, but there are better choices across the board that might not be as annoying to make. Be more expensive, but they might not be as annoying. Though I haven't looked at the cost for Mastery 3 these days. I know when I looked at Mastery 2 it was like 60k per capsule in the low end, up to 100k on the high end. So maybe it's not too bad, but I mean, even saying that 60k on the low end is what? Need 10 of these, so that's 600k for one Mastery 3 setup. And I mean, even then, that's still not that's actually pretty bad. That's one Mastery 3. That's, and you want like multiples, and if you get 10 of them, I mean, it's expensive. The long story short, guys, Mastery is expensive. Going all class is kind of expensive. And if you do augment for all class, just know that you are technically at a slight disadvantage for potency. While you have the flexibility of being able to use multiple weapon types, you do lose, you know, the focus of getting the most damage out of one weapon type specifically. So worth mentioning. Now, this next set I actually had to look into because I was unaware this was even a thing. The basic S augments. Now, these apparently come from the Ultra Support set. You can get a hold of these by spending AC. I'm not sure that these are sellable on the market. They might be. If they are, great. I don't know the prices of them. It's something I would probably research on your own. But again, these are pretty self-explanatory. Melee weapon potency, range weapon potency, and technique weapon potency. It's just an S version of the basic augments. To my knowledge, they do stack, so you can use both of them, but realistically, there's still better choices out there. Had to catch my breath there for just a moment. The next option is going to be an expensive one. Now, the reason I'm going to talk about it here is because this is actually what I replace my basic augment with. And honestly, what I'd recommend is if you are going to use this, or if you're not going to use this next augment, use a basic augment in its slot because it's still very strong. The addi capsules. The addi capsule specifically came from an AC support scratch. It's the AC select support items. I wish this didn't exist so early on because now I want them and they're really expensive. To give you an idea, addi def mel is like 14 mil right now, while this AC scratch is no longer available. What I'd recommend for anyone who is, you know, actively trying to keep their gear up to date, can't, you know, predict the future, I would say whenever these support scratches come around, buy a few of these. That's what I did, and stock them. You might want to sell them later. Like, for example, the ones I purchased were like 4 mil. I can sell them now for an extra 10 mil on each one because they're selling for 14 mil at the moment. Or you could hold on to them for yourself to use for whenever you're setting something up. But this is a very expensive option to augment for good returns. But again, keep in mind that that money is never going to come back once you augment it. So it's up to you whether that's worth it for you or not. Most people are going to tell you it's not worth it, but no one can decide worth. It's only up to the individual that's actually using it. For some people, they like to speed run. They're pushing as much damage as possible and they have access to that amount of money. By all means, go for it. If I were to have a choice of the addi I'd go after, I choose to go after the addi defs just because it's potency floor and potency, which does actively increase your DPS by the most of all of these. I know some forces opt to go the addi spitek. I'm probably saying that wrong. The Speedtech or whatever you want to call it, it gives you PP, but honestly, any of these are gonna work. They all give 2.5% potency, and on top of that, you get something else along with it. In some cases HP, in some cases PP. This one seems to be a little bit of both, and then this one is down or all down resistance. What that basically means is it just means you do more down damage on a large target that you're gonna knock it down. So this is helpful there. That might be something to go after, but realistically speaking, I haven't actually, wait, hold on. All down resistance. Wait, maybe I'm misreading that. Is that just resistance in general? No, damage resistance is here. So yeah, I think this is just down resistance. Like you do more down damage to your target because you can't get downed as as a player. So I'm assuming that's what that refers to. I don't know the math on this. I haven't looked into the math on this, so I can't tell you how useful this would actually be. I would probably err on either addi def mel or maybe addi spira, or spy mel, or spira, or spiritech, or spytech. One of those is probably what I would recommend going with overall. But again, like I mentioned, unless you already have them or you just have the capital to burn and you're totally fine with burning that much money, I would probably shy away from this and just pick up a main stat or one of the options we're going to go over here in just a moment. Now, the next three choices are going to fully depend on what you're going for in your augment setup and how hard you're going to go in that augment setup, I guess you could say. You're going to go defensive, offensive, so on and so forth. The next three we're going to talk about are Secreta, Dread, and Domina, because they're all in this one nice little neat spot here. Domina is a great choice if you want potency and you're going with all attack. If you want some damage, you want some support along with it as well. I guess you can call this support. I'm trying to think of a good word for it, but I guess the best way you could just is support, I guess. But you don't want to sacrifice too much. Now, if you want to go all in on damage, you have Secreta as an option. Secreta at level 3 is going to give you 2% potency and 2% floor potency, which are both very powerful, at the cost of 10 HP and 1.5% damage resistance. So it makes you a little bit more glass cannony. Now, if you don't want to go with that option, you want a bit more bulk while still getting a bit of damage, you have the option of Dreadkeeper. Dreadkeeper 3, mind you, also is a massive amount of BP, but realistically what you're getting is 30 HP and 7 PP, which is huge. I don't think there's anything else that gives that much right now in the game, while also getting damage resistant plus 2%, and then your bit of offense is your floor potency increase. So it's not bad, but at the same time, it's not the best option for for offense. It's just a good defensive option while also giving you some damage. So you'll probably see these three around the same slot usage, depending upon what you're going for. I personally have Secreta in, and with my 5th slot, I'll probably be adding Dread, just to kind of balance itself out a little bit more. But I maybe look at Domina. I'm not sure, honestly. It's a weird slot. I'm gonna figure out what I want to do with it, and I'll get back to you guys on that one. Now, the next few choices are going to depend, or are basically going to be the options I feel are a bit less expensive, depending upon what you're going for exactly. And it's something that you could fill in if, like, something I mentioned, you were just like, oh, that's too expensive, or I don't want to go after that, or I don't have access to it. These are all going to be options that you can use instead, essentially. First, we'll talk about notes. Notes are fairly self-explanatory as well. You can combine notes to get these combination souls or combination skills specifically. I'm trying to think of anything else you can say about them, but they're filler slots. Magnus notes dope, range notes dope. I mean, like, they're really, really nice. And I think the notes combine into the Dominas, actually. I might have misspoke there, I apologize. But these notes are pretty dope. I'd probably pick up one of these here. This one's all right. And then, of course, if you're someone who's going for an all stat setup, you have a good note here. I'm not going to pronounce this name. It's just, I mess it up every time. We're not going to go there. The notes are good filler if you happen to have a slot you need to fill and you don't have anything else available to you. They drop fairly regularly, so they shouldn't be too expensive overall. One option that tends to get overlooked quite a bit, I'm going to actually scroll up to get to it because I don't see it here. I probably passed it, is the dual souls. The dual souls are just potency. It's 2 types of potency, so you either get melee ranged, melee tech, or ranged tech, but you can use them either in a dual, like a multi-weapon setup that you're trying to get, stat in both sides. You can use multiple, like say you have one of each on each of your units if you're doing an all unit setup, or like an all class setup, just to spread out your potency evenly across the board. Or if you're just even going for a 1 stat setup, like say you're going just melee, you can just grab male raw or male tech just to get the extra 1.5% or 1.75% damage in that slot. It's good to fill, so it's not really a bad choice at all. It's a good filling augment overall. And last but certainly not least, you have the option of having a revolving augment slot. What I mean by a revolving augment slot, I mean it's something that you swap out depending upon what you're doing or what you're going to be doing for a few weeks. Back over in Ilia, when we were doing things like my solo Bujin TA, or doing the beginning of Ilio Destroyers, where we fought the Gigantics version of Bujin as fast as possible, one of the things that I augmented was actually an element. Where is it? Elemental augment, here we go, where you actually get a good chunk of potency if the target's weak to the element that you have. Now, your weapon doesn't have to be that element, it just has to be weak to the element that you have augmented. So for example, Ice Exploit, I had this on my weapons in my unit to increase the amount of potency I had because I was fighting enemies that were weak to ice. And it was a good choice because it was really, really cheap. And I could swap it out whenever I wanted to. Right now, in Redem, when we got over to it, a lot of enemies were weak to, I believe it was Dark the bosses were weak to, but then, of course, the seasonal event came out and everything is weak to wind. You can opt to have this as one of your slots and then, of course, swap it out with something cheap or maybe the next element when we get back to whatever that element might be. The cool thing about PSO2 NGS is The bosses in a region are all weak to the same element at the same time, which is great. I guess the urgent quest bosses specifically. You don't really need to augment to fight random enemies out in the world. Usually your base augments are decent enough. You don't have to specifically build your augments around them. In most cases, you're going to choose like your subclass, like being forced just to have enough PP to crush enemies that are in front of you. That's the most amount of optimization you're going to look at when you're fighting enemies overall. Outside of that, your augments are just going to be whatever you can use, and this is a good choice for, like I said, a revolving augment that you can swap out depending upon realistically what you're doing. And that covers pretty much everything. All the augments that I think are worth talking about. I mean, we kind of covered everything. We got the Gigas, we got everything in that. Actually, I think we missed Gigas. We might have missed Gigas. I think we missed Gigas. It's obvious. Pick up a Gigas augment. Like, it's. Do I have to explain this one to you? It's just good. Like they're just good augments. They give you some HP, but they give you 2.5% potency. You guys see a pattern? 2.5% melee potency, 2.5% tech potency, range potency. That's pretty much like the max that you can going for as far as damage is concerned. Getting 2.5% potency, and then if you can't get potency of your weapon type or just base potency, get a potency floor increase along with it as well. That's basically it. If you can get PP, you get PP as well. And that sets you up really good. To give you guys an idea of what I'm currently running, I don't want this video to run too terribly long. It already technically has run quite long, but I'm okay with that. This one's a bit more involved. My current augments I'm running are a soul, so I run Dust Soul since I'm using melee. It'll likely be switched to Didal Soul when I have the option to, depending upon if I'm going to have new units or if I'm going to be using my same units. We talk about that in a different video you guys probably saw. My other augment I have is an addi at the moment. I likely will not have an addi on my next unit set, but I might, so we'll have to see. I might opt to sell mine. But addi Deathmail is what I go with, melee and floor potency. If I wasn't going to go with that, I'd probably go with addi Spymail. Still a really good choice, and 6 PP, so really, really nice there. Let's see. So I got my addi, I got my soul, my Gigas. So this is a pretty standard one for me. Gigas stat, if I can find it. Yep, Gigas stat. I go Gigas Might 3, fairly straightforward, get 15 HP, and 2.5 potency. And then my final one currently is Secreta, but I kind of my brain is like, do I want Secreta or do I want Dreadkeeper? In this final slot, if you wanted to go cheap, I would go with the element option, actually, because it's 2.5% potency, which technically would be a bit more damage. For very, very cheap. Like if you're looking at damage versus cost ratio, it's really, really cheap. And you don't lose out on the HP or the damage resistance if you went with that over Alt Secreta. But Alt Secreta is what I'm using currently. It's a bit more glass cannon-y. I do get slapped pretty hard. In some cases, I get one shot, which kind of sucks. But if you're used to playing that way, it's not a big deal. Dreadkeeper was a good choice for a while too. I tried using 3 Dreadkeeper and I was just super, super tanky. So if you were fighting a lot of Gigantics and you feel like you're getting absolutely washed, Dreadkeeper's not a bad choice. And that's really it. My 5th augmentation slot's probably going to be Dreadkeeper. That's probably what I'm going to use. Either that or a revolving augment slot, like with the elements. We'll have to see what I decide to go with, but that's probably what I'm going to go with here. If you guys have a specific augment setup that you guys like and you want to share it with me, feel free to toss it into the comments below. If you have any questions, again, comments, or you guys are more than welcome to DM me, whether it be on Twitter or over in Discord. You guys can find me on my Discord. I'm at the very, very top on the right-hand side. Click my name, send me a message. They're totally open. I'm more than happy to answer your questions for you. Anyway, guys, if you like the video, toss it a like. Much appreciate it. Subscribe if you want to keep up with more. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Take care. Peace out.